January 2023. Staring down the collapse of France's pension system, President Emmanuel Macron does the unthinkable. He raises the retirement age from 62 to 64. The reaction? Millions of protesters marched the streets and trade unions across the country went on strike. Garbage piled up on the curbs of Paris, trains stopped running, and the country, it came to a halt. But as angry as French citizens were, Macron was right. French pensioners now make 2% more than the average working French adult. And since 1970, wages have increased 100% while pensions grew 160%. The truth is, in France, it pays not to work. But as 2025 came to a close, Parliament decided to freeze Macron's plan until at least January 2028. What was the cost? Well, just a measly 1.9 billion euros. But French pensions are simply one head of an increasingly problematic hydra. France has run a budget deficit since 1974, and it continues to spend like money just grows on trees. But now, the debt man, he's come to collect, leaving France with a bill it can't afford, and there's no painless way out. I am Cam from 2 and 20, and this is France. Viva la spending! Let's start off the video by actually giving some props to France. They've had a long history of the rights of the common man, and frankly, much of the world has to thank France for this. From the bloody French Revolution to the Paris Commune of 1871, the French have shown time and time again that they will not tolerate oppression of the masses. And it's this spirit that eventually came to a head in 1936 when a massive wave of strikes led to the election of the left-wing Popular Front government. In a short time span, the Popular Front introduced the 40-hour work week, 2 weeks of paid holidays, and recognition of trade union rights within the workplace. And these modern benefits, they were further expanded after World War II with the introduction of the pay-as-you-go pension system. And this idea, it's simple. The current generation of workers would pay for the pension of the retired generation. What this model did is it established a social contract where the young supports the old. And at the time, it worked. The period known as the Golden 30 Years was marked by higher birth rates, low unemployment, and a healthy ratio of workers to retirees, about 4 to 1. But the system is more complicated and problematic than it seems. For one, France has many super powerful unions. And unions being unions, they wanted special treatment. To this end, the government allowed pensions for powerful unions like the National Railway, energy companies, and the Paris Public Transport, all in an effort to maintain their more generous schemes, but backstopped by public funds. But what made these special union pensions so special? Well, let me tell you. So normal pensions had a retirement age of 65, but the special pensions retired as early as 50. Normal pensions were based on the top 25 years of income, whereas the special pensions were based on the final 6 months. So here's what happens when you do this. People retire earlier, they receive pensions for longer, and they receive more in pension dollars per year. But it gets worse. In 1983, the socialist president François Mitterrand lowered the legal retirement age from 65 to a young 60. So why did he do this? Well, as any great politician would, votes. And although this was eventually raised back up to 62, the cost of this decision accelerated the system's imbalance. And in a baby boomer era, this could all be supported, but you can't outrun the math. As the population began to invert, the ratio of workers to retirees shrank from 4 to 1 to 1.7 to 1. Today, 14% of France's GDP is spent on pensions. That is significantly higher than the OECD average and 28% higher than Germany. And let's say Macron's reforms do go through. The deficit across all pension schemes is expected to increase from 6.6 billion euros in 2025 to 15 billion by 2035. So why don't we get the government together to prevent this ticking time bomb? Well, are you forgetting something? This is France. Things are never supposed to be that easy. So this might sound strange to say, but France might have too much democracy. If you will, a tyranny of the masses. This makes it impossible to accomplish anything. To put this into perspective, France has had 8 prime ministers in the last 10 years. And since 2024, they've had 5. We should say France's political system is a bit unique compared to the US, so bear with us. France has a dual executive, the president who's head of state and the prime minister who's head of government. The president is elected every 5 years, whereas the prime minister is appointed by the president and must win the confidence of the National Assembly. The National Assembly has 577 members elected by the public, and these are the real people who call the shots. And unlike the US, which has 2 amazing major political parties, France's National Assembly has 11 official parties with seats. This means that to get anything done, coalitions need to be formed, and compromises are often made. But why does France have so many parties? The answer is pretty simple: the 2-round system. When voting for the president or National Assembly, voters have 2 rounds of votes. This means that politicians are incentivized to niche down and create parties around, frankly, their personality. That never goes wrong, does it? So how can Macron manage all these people and personalities? Well, they can use Odoo. Running a business when everything is in one place. Odoo is an all-in-one management platform that gives you everything you need to run your business or dysfunctional government. Sales, accounting, CRM, inventory, and even your website is all connected. If you need a website, Odoo makes it simple. You pick the type of site you want, choose your colors, select the pages or features you need. Odoo will handle the rest. Let's say I wanted to sell a basic financial literacy course to the French government, which they probably need. I could build the site in minutes, take payments, manage customers, and have everything synced automatically in one system. You can customize everything: text, images, layout, and bring it to life with animation. AI can even translate the site into French for me. And no, not that French. Your first app is free forever with unlimited hosting and support. And when you're ready to scale, Odoo offers over 45 connected apps. You can try the full suite free for 15 days. No credit cards required. Link in the description or scan the QR code on the screen. Now, back to the video. And because there will be a second vote, this vote is not wasted. And unlike in the US, where voting for a third party is most likely a wasted vote, RFK Jr., the only way to win an election from the first round is to receive 50% of the votes, a nearly impossible hurdle. A second round is almost always held, where anyone that received at least 12.5% of the total number of registered voters qualifies. And the result of this is that multiple parties are vying for a constituency National Assembly seat. But in the second round, the winner just needs to get the most votes. This creates a highly fragmented National Assembly, where it is nearly impossible to get anything done. And although this better represents democracy, it cripples the French government. Any meaningful change or reform is impossible. And this is what happened in 2025 with Macron's previously proposed pension reforms. This is what led to the deadlock over the 2025 budget and led to the fall of the Michel Barnier government. And similarly, and I'm going to butcher this name, French viewers, so forgive me, François Bayrou's welfare cuts led to a confidence vote defeat in September 2025. Here's what you need to know about France. The minority rules. But this inability to push through necessary reforms, it's not just limited to pensions. France's economy is deeply challenged. Real GDP is growing at less than 1% and lags peer nations in the EU. The unemployment rate continues to rise and domestic consumption is slowing down. And most importantly, France's debt, it's not like it's slowing down. Currently, it's around 113% of GDP. And that French debt burden, it's expected to increase to 120% by 2027. To put it into perspective, that's double the EU mandated limit of 60%. Now, to France's credit, a little over 50% of EU countries don't actually meet that mark. But France, it's no ordinary EU member. It is the second largest economy, and unlike a Greek debt default, a French debt default would be catastrophic to the Eurozone. Moreover, France's budget deficit is 6.1%, which is 2 times the 3% limit mandated by the EU. And this is the really sad part. It was actually a French economist, and I'm gonna butcher this again, Guy Abayoul, who was the thought leader behind this rule. And the recent credit downgrading for Moody's and others has only made the debt burden more expensive and increased the deficit through growth in interest payments. It is now so dire that pundits are questioning whether the IMF will be needed in the coming years to rescue France. So how will France address this? Well, it won't, because as mentioned, France can't really fix any of this. Even among all of this chaos, the National Assembly continues to wreak havoc on the future of France. And the divisions, they aren't as simple as left versus right. In fact, the far left and the far right are oddly aligned on inconvenient and extremely important policy issues. To save money, the centrists propose cuts, but the far left and the far right are against many of them. The far left, LFI, is against the 3% austerity rule on the grounds that it prevents necessary social and ecological investment. The far right, RN, believes the 3% rule restricts the ability of the government to fund national priorities. As you can see, this budget deficit is hopeless. What about slowing economic activity? To stimulate the economy, the centrists want to increase trade, but the far left and far right both share anti-globalism tendencies and argue for increased tariffs and French protectionism. Well, what about pensions? Both the far left and far right oppose Macron's retirement age increase, and the RN wants 62, while the LFI wants 60. Great! But this gets even more confusing because the far left and far right also disagree on many topics, including taxes, immigration, and the environment. And this is before you factor in the smorgasbord of smaller parties that also hold seats. These parties are not so easily categorizable, and many of them hate each other. The LFI hates the RN and vice versa. The LFI hates Renaissance, the RN hates Ensemble. Factions of the left-wing coalition, especially the PS and Greens, they despise the LFI. And then to top off that cherry, you layer on the extremely powerful unions and special interest groups. For example, the CGT, which historically was tied to the Communist Party, maintains its militant leftist ideology and opposes nearly all economic reforms. Or the FO, a more moderate CGT, but still standing in the way of most necessary reforms. The list goes on. To get anything done, you first have to manage egos and alliances that make the Murdochs look like a well-functioning family. Okay, that was a lot. We do not say this lightly, but France is beginning to look like a failed experiment. With Macron likely on his way out in the next few years and the National Rally now, arguably the most popular party in France, populism and fragmentation have devoured the French Republic. Even as the country is presented with undeniable facts, they are unable to make the tough choices to steer towards greener pastures. The sad thing is, a part of this is due to the beautiful and proud heritage of the French, standing up against the state, standing up for their rights. But the common French man or woman is no longer a peasant, and the elderly are no longer scrounging for scraps. So why keep fighting? Charles de Gaulle put it best. He said, "I have tried to pull France out of the quagmire. She will return to her errors and to her vomitings. I cannot prevent the French from being French." Thank you for watching, subscribe to Toon20, and check out our free Discord community in the description. We actually chat in there and hang out.